The cabin leaned like an old drunk against the wind, its roof sagging, its door hanging crooked, its windows nothing more than black eyes staring out over the empty prairie. Elias Boone had bought it that morning for 12 cents, more out of stubbornness than need, for the crowd at the auction had laughed when the bid began. A cursed place, they had called it, not worth the nails holding it together. Their voices still clung to his ears as his boots pressed the dust, carrying him toward the sagging porch inside comma. The air was stale, filled with the scent of rot and old smoke. Shafts of sunlight speared through holes in the roof, catching the dance of dust motes. Elias stepped cautiously, his spurs muted by the dirt-packed floor. He expected rats or snakes, maybe the remnants of some forgotten squatter. What he found stilled him to his core. A girl hung from the rafters, tall as a man, her body swaying slightly as if the room itself breathed around her. The rope creaked under her weight. At first glance she seemed dead, her head bowed, black hair hiding her face. But then Elias saw the faintest rise of her chest, a shallow shudder of breath. "God above," he whispered, his hands already reaching for the knife at his belt. The blade slipped through the frayed rope, and she fell into his arms with a weight that staggered him. She was no child. Her limbs were long, her shoulders broad, her skin bronze and bruised. He laid her carefully on the dirt floor, brushing hair back from her face. High cheekbones, strong jaw, lips cracked from thirst. A girl, yes, but built like a woman carved from stone. She stirred, moaning low, eyes fluttering. The whispers of the town came back in that moment, harsh and cruel. A monster Apache girl caught stealing. They strung her up, so she'd serve as a warning. Too big for a girl, too wild to be trusted. That's why the place went for pennies. Elias clenched his teeth. He had thought the talk nothing more than superstition, men puffing their chests at the saloon. Now he understood. The cabin was not cursed. It was stained. She gasped for air, her voice no stronger than the rasp of paper. "Don't touch me." Elias sat back on his heels, hands raised. "You're safe." But safe was a word with no weight in this country. Her eyes opened, dark, wide, burning with shame. She turned her face to the floor, as though the sight of him was worse than the rope had been. "What's your name?" he asked, gently. Silence. Then a whisper, so soft he thought it might have been the wind. "Nayeli." She pushed herself upright, swaying. He reached out, but she flinched, clutching the ragged edge of her dress over her chest. Her wrists bore angry burns from the rope, her ankles swollen from binding. He saw the tremor in her hands, the pride in her posture that tried and failed to cover her humiliation. He rose slowly, moving toward the table that leaned crooked in the corner. From his satchel, he pulled a canteen, setting it within her, reach without a word. She stared at it, then at him. Finally, she lifted it, drinking with small, painful swallows. Elias turned his eyes away, scanning the room instead. The rafters groaned. Mice rustled in the walls. It was a tomb of a place. And yet she had been left here to die. Her body meant as a spectacle for any who passed. When she spoke again, her voice was sharper. "Why cut me down?" He looked at her, seeing the defiance behind the exhaustion. "Because no man or woman deserves to hang like a carcass." Her jaw tightened. She muttered something in Apache, words he did not understand but felt in the weight of her tone. Distrust, disbelief, maybe a curse. She pulled the blanket he offered around her shoulders, shrinking from his gaze. Elias let the silence stretch. He had no gift for words, no easy charm. What he offered was space and the patience of a man who knew grief. Days passed in that uneasy truce. Nayeli remained in the cabin's shadowed corner, rising only when he stepped outside to fetch water or chop wood. She ate sparingly, eyes down as though ashamed of needing his bread. At night he heard her weep softly, stifling the sound with the blanket. He said nothing, though the ache of it pressed on him like an iron weight. On the third evening, as a storm gathered, The sky split open with a sudden crack of thunder. Rain lashed the prairie, wind howling through the broken boards of the cabin. Elias hurried to bar the door, but a movement caught his eye. Nayeli stood outside, barefoot in the mud, her hair whipped by the wind. Lightning carved her silhouette. Against the black sky, tall, proud, unbroken despite the rope burns still raw on her skin. She lifted her face to the storm, eyes closed, lips parted as though daring the heavens themselves to strike her down again. Elias stood in the doorway, watching. Words rose to his tongue and fell away. There was nothing to say. The thunder rolled across the plains, echoing like the drums of some ancient war. And in that charged silence between them, he understood. She had survived the rope, but the greater battle was still inside her. He stayed there, silent witness to her defiance as the storm raged on. By the time the storm broke and the prairie settled back into silence, word had already seeped through the town that Elias Boone was harboring the giant Apache girl. It began as whispers in the saloon, spread with the scrape of boots along the boardwalk, and soon every mouth in Dry Creek was shaping her name into something twisted. They spoke of her like a beast caged in his cabin, of Elias as a fool who'd bought not just a cursed house, but a cursed life. By dusk, men rode out to his land, their laughter carrying before them like the clang of iron chains. Elias heard them before he saw them. 5 riders, faces shadowed beneath brims, voices thick with mockery. "We hear you got yourself a trophy." "Boone," one called, his tone sticky with malice. Another spat into the dirt, eyes flicking to the cabin. "Best put her back where she belongs," ropes still swinging. Nayeli was inside, listening. He felt her presence at the window, the shame rising in her like a tide. She thought herself the cause of his ruin, and perhaps she was right. Yet Elias stepped forward, planting his boots firm in the mud. "This land's mine. What happens here's no concern of yours." The men laughed, but there was no humor in it. They muttered curses, promised trouble, then rode off with dust in their wake. Yet the silence they left behind was worse than their threats, for it carried the weight of eyes that would not look away. That night, Elias found her packing what little she had, just the blanket and the canteen. She would not meet his gaze. "I should go," she said flatly. "They'll burn your house if I stay." He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, studying her without haste. "Let them try. You don't understand." Her voice cracked. "I bring only ruin, everywhere." He did not answer at once, for words were not his gift. But after a moment he said quietly, "Then let the ruin fall on me." She froze, her back to him, the blanket clutched to her chest. He saw her shoulders shake, though whether from anger or grief he could not tell. The days that followed were uneasy, yet something shifted. Nayeli began to step outside when no riders passed, her bare feet brushing the grass. Elias, saying nothing, led a horse to the corral, showing her how to rest her hand against its neck, how to breathe until the creature's shudder eased. She learned quickly, her touch firm, her body steady despite the scars. When she mounted for the first time, she sat tall, the wind catching her hair, and for an instant she looked less like a hunted girl than a figure carved out of the wide sky itself. Later, when Elias returned from mending fence, he found his shirt folded neatly by the door, the tear at the shoulder stitched by an unfamiliar but careful hand. She did not speak of it, and he did not thank her aloud. Yet that night, when he placed half his supper quietly by her side, she ate without turning her face away. But the town did not forgive. One night, fire bloomed against the horizon. The barn. Elias woke to the smell of smoke, the crackle of timber. Horses screamed inside, thrashing against their stalls. He ran toward it, and in the flicker of the blaze he saw Nayeli, blanket clutched to her shoulders, standing in the doorway as if already resolved to flee. "They won't stop," she cried over the roar of flames. "If I leave now, they'll spare you." Elias seized her wrist, firm but not cruel. "This is your home too." The words hung in the smoke between them. For the first time since the rope, she looked straight at him. Then she tore free, not to run but to plunge into the fire. Her strength was not a curse now, but salvation. She kicked down a stall door with one blow, dragging a terrified mare into the night air. Elias followed, dousing flames with buckets of water. But it was Nayeli who returned again and again, pulling creatures from the inferno until her hair was singed and her arms blackened with soot. When the last horse staggered out, they collapsed together in the dirt, coughing, eyes burning from smoke. Around them shadows lingered, townsfolk who had crept out to witness the ruin they had sown. They watched in silence as the girl they had mocked stood against the fire, her size no longer monstrous but mighty, her defiance etched in every line. Of her body. No man spoke. None dared. Slowly the crowd drifted back into the darkness, their whispers changed, uneasy, uncertain. Elias turned to her, the orange glow painting her face. He did not declare anything, for words would have broken the fragile truth between them. Instead, he lifted his hat from his head and set it gently upon hers. It sat awkwardly, far too small, but it was an offering, a sign of belonging that needed no translation. Nayeli lowered her eyes, not in shame but in acceptance, the faintest curve touching her lips. She sat taller, shoulders squared, as though reclaiming the body that had once betrayed her. Ash drifted like snow across the prairie, the barn smoldering behind them. The night was quiet, save for the ragged breath of horses and the steady rhythm of the wind. In that silence, something unspoken settled between them, a promise not yet shaped into words, but alive in the space they shared. The fire would scar, the land and the town's judgment would not vanish overnight. But Elias knew, as surely as he knew the shape of the horizon, that what he had found in 12 cents worth of ruin was beyond the price of gold. And Nayeli, staring into the embers, seemed to know it too.